The Crossroads Prime Station hung in the dark space between two star systems like a metal spider web catching ships instead of flies. Captain Vincent Hayes stood at the observation window of the human research vessel and watched the stars. His daughter Emma pressed her face against the glass beside him, her breath making small clouds that disappeared as fast as they appeared. "Dad, how many stars are there?" Emma asked. Vincent smiled and put his hand on her small shoulder. "More than anyone can count, sweetheart, and somewhere out there every single star has planets around it." Emma thought about this for a moment. She was 7 years old and smart in the way that made people stop and listen when she asked questions. She had Vincent's dark hair and her mother's curious eyes. Her mother had died 3 years ago, and Vincent had thrown himself into his work on the research vessel. Emma came with him on every mission now. It kept them together. The station's alarms made no sound. They did not use alarms. They were in species, and they communicated through something that looked like it came from their bodies, but was really information moving through a network that Vincent's team did not fully understand. What the humans noticed was that ships moved in perfect formation, that crews made decisions instantly, and that logic was clean and cold and never wrong. K7 entered the human section of the station with 2 guards. The arbitrator was tall and thin, with a body that looked like it was made of brown metal and moving joints. His head was mostly antennae and large black eyes that did not blink. Vincent had met K7 5 times before. Each meeting had gone the same way. They wanted something. The humans gave them information or resources. The transaction happened. No emotion, no complications. "Captain Hayes," K7 said. His voice came through a translation device that made it sound almost human, but not quite. "I have information about a discovery in the disputed territories." Vincent had Emma sit down near the window. He told her to look at the stars and not to listen to grown-up talk. Emma obeyed, but Vincent knew she was listening anyway. "The crystal field on Moon 7-9 in the system," K7 continued. "Our exploration team discovered a rare formation, 90% purity in the crystalline structure. The resources alone justify immediate claim." Vincent nodded. Crystal fields like that were valuable, not weapons, not fuel. But the materials could be used for 100 different technologies. They wanted them. "We filed the formal claim according to galactic law," K7 said. "However, our team discovered something unexpected. Human remains, structures that indicate a failed colony from over 200 years ago. Your species abandoned this location." This was where Vincent's attention sharpened. They did not mention old human colonies without reason. "Because of this discovery," K7 said, "we believe the claim may be contested. We have studied your species' history. Humans often return to locations they have abandoned. They become emotionally attached to failure. They make poor logical decisions based on these attachments." Vincent said nothing. He waited. This was how negotiations worked with the "you said nothing until they finished." "Therefore, we propose a solution," K7 said. "One that is efficient and clear. Your species will formally withdraw any claim to the moon and the crystal field. In exchange, we will not contest the mining rights to 3 other crystal formations in neutral space. This favors your species. The mathematics are simple." It was a good deal. Vincent knew it was a good deal. The 3 formations they offered were almost as valuable as the one they wanted to keep. "I need to discuss this with my superiors," Vincent said. "That is acceptable," K7 said. "However, we have decided to ensure there is motivation for quick agreement. We will be taking your daughter as insurance. She will remain safe and unharmed for exactly 72 hours. After that time, we cannot guarantee her continued." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Vincent felt it in his chest first, a tightness that made breathing difficult. He looked at Emma. She had turned away from the stars and was looking at him with eyes that suddenly seemed older than 7 years old. "No," Vincent said. His voice was flat. "That is not acceptable." "It is a standard procedure for insurance," K7 said. "Your species should understand this logic. We will hold the child. You will agree to withdraw the claim. The child will be returned. No harm comes to anyone. They obtain resources. The humans obtain different resources. Everyone achieves their objective." "I said no," Vincent repeated. K7 tilted his head. The antennae moved in patterns that Vincent could not read. "Captain Hayes, you are being illogical. Your daughter is safe if you comply. She is in danger if you do not comply. The choice is simple." Emma stood up. She walked over to Vincent and took his hand. She did not cry, she did not panic. She just held his hand and looked at them with the same curiosity she had shown the stars. "I will not give you my daughter," Vincent said. "Then you are choosing her death," K7 said. "This is your decision." The guards moved forward. They moved with mechanical precision, like machines that had been programmed by a single mind. Vincent understood now why they were so feared. They had no hesitation. They had no doubt. They simply did what the collective mind instructed them to do. Emma let go of Vincent's hand. She looked up at him and nodded once, a small movement that said she understood. Then she walked toward the guards with the bravery of a child who did not yet know enough to be afraid. Vincent wanted to reach for her. Every part of his body wanted to grab his daughter and pull her back. But he understood something in that moment that changed everything. They had made a mistake. They had studied human behavior and learned about logic and resources and efficient decision-making. But they had missed something crucial. They did not understand what a parent would do to protect a child. They did not understand that there was no calculation, no logic, no equation that would make Vincent accept this. They took Emma into a containment area. The door sealed behind them with a hiss that sounded final. Vincent stood alone at the observation window. He looked at the stars. Somewhere out there, his daughter was in the hands of an enemy that did not understand mercy. Somewhere out there, a species had just made the worst decision of their galactic existence. Vincent turned away from the window. He had 72 hours to get his daughter back. He had no army. He had no weapons that matched the fleet. He had only a crew of humans and the unshakable conviction that no power in the galaxy would keep him from his child. He pressed the communication button on his wrist. "All senior officers to the command center, now." The response came immediately. This was about to become a very interesting 72 hours. The command center of the human research vessel filled quickly. Lieutenant was the first to arrive. He was a military man, trained in tactics and strategy, and he understood immediately from Vincent's face that something was very wrong. Captain Wells came next, the who had spent the last 5 years studying alien species. Then came Chief Engineer Robert Turner, who knew every system on the ship better than the engineers who had built it. Vincent told them what had happened. He spoke in clear, simple words, leaving out nothing. When he finished, there was silence. The kind of silence that fills a room when people realize the world has changed in a way they cannot undo. "They cannot be trusted," said. She had worked with them before. She understood their culture better than anyone on the ship. "They are not evil, but they are not bound by emotion the way we are. They will keep Emma alive only as long as she serves their purpose. The moment the calculation changes, they will eliminate her without hesitation." "How long do we have?" Robert asked. 72 hours, Vincent said. "They said after that they cannot guarantee her." Pulled up a tactical display. The vessel was enormous, 3 times the size of the human research ship, more weapons, more armor, more everything. He studied the numbers and then looked at Vincent. "We cannot fight them," said. It was not an opinion, it was a fact. "Directly, we do not have the firepower, we cannot outrun them, we cannot negotiate. Every logical approach says we must either comply or accept that we have lost." "Then we do not do the logical approach," Vincent said. Looked at him with understanding. "You are going to attempt a rescue." "Yes." "This will almost certainly fail," said, "but I understand why you must try." Robert rubbed his hands together. He was an engineer, and engineers believed that problems had solutions. "What do we have to work with?" Vincent pulled up the data they had on the vessel. The ship was called the Harmony of Purpose. It was a military transport designed to move materials and personnel across vast distances. It had been to Crossroads Prime many times. The human technicians had recorded everything they could see. "We have detailed structural scans of the ship from previous visits," Vincent said. "We know the docking mechanisms, we know the basic internal layout, we know their communication protocols." "That is not enough," said. But he was already working, his hands moving across the display, pulling up information, running calculations. "Give me everything you have." For the next 12 hours, the team did not stop. Robert worked with his engineers to modify the ship. They removed cargo that was not essential. They recalibrated power systems. They pushed the engines beyond their design specifications. The ship had never been meant to be a military vessel. They were going to make it into something that could move fast and fight hard. Worked on understanding weaknesses. She had studied their behavior. They were collective. Their decisions moved through a network that could process information faster than human brains but moved in patterns. They expected their opponents to behave logically. If you did something illogical, they had difficulty responding because it fell outside their predictive models. Planned the rescue operation. He brought in Sergeant Helen Cross, who led the human military personnel on the research vessel. Helen had trained for combat, but she had never fought an actual battle. She listened to explain the plan and did not flinch. "We cannot fight the whole ship," Helen said. "So we do not fight the whole ship. We move in fast, we get the captain's daughter, we get out." "That is the theory," said. "The reality is much more complicated." 12 hours became 24 hours. The vessel maintained its position above the research ship. No additional demands, no communications, just waiting. They were patient. They knew that time was on their side. Eventually, the humans would understand the situation was hopeless and would comply. Vincent did not sleep. He sat in his private quarters and thought about Emma. He thought about the day she was born. He thought about the time she had fallen off the observation platform and broken her arm. He thought about every moment they had shared. He thought about the fact that he could not protect her from everything. But this one thing, this specific threat, he could do something about. On the 26th hour came to him with the plan. It was not a good plan. It was not a plan with a high probability of success, but it was a plan. "We approached the vessel under the pretense of a diplomatic shuttle," explained. "We use the communication protocols we have on record. They expect negotiations. They will let us dock. They will expect us to bring an official who will formally agree to withdraw the claim." "And instead," Vincent asked. "And instead we bring Sergeant Cross and her tactical team. They will move through the ship using the structural data we have. They will find Emma. They will get her out. All of this must happen before they realize what is happening." "What is the probability of success?" Vincent asked. Looked at him. "Honestly, less than 20%, but it is the only plan where Emma does not end up dead or controlled by for the rest of her life." Vincent stood up. He looked at the tactical display showing the vessel hanging in space like a metal wasp. "When do we launch?" 6 hours, said. "We need time to prepare the team and make sure all the modifications are complete." Vincent nodded. He had 6 hours to prepare himself for what came next. He had 6 hours to accept that he might fail. He had 6 hours to commit completely to the attempt anyway. The bridge of the vessel was completely silent. No alarms, no voices, just the hum of systems operating with perfect efficiency. K7 stood at the center of the command area. Around him, dozens of crew members worked at their stations. They were all connected to the same collective mind. They all knew everything that every other member knew. K7 was satisfied with the situation. The mathematics of the negotiation were clear. The human captain would comply, all species when their offspring were threatened. It was basic biological programming. The human would withdraw the claim. They would obtain the crystal field. Everyone would benefit according to their nature. K7 did not know that the human captain had a different nature than the expected. He did not know that some creatures in the galaxy cannot be predicted by mathematics. He did not know that he had just made the worst strategic error in the history of the collective. In 6 hours, he would begin to learn. Emma sat in the containment cell and did what she had been taught to do in an emergency. She observed. She paid attention to everything. She did not cry or panic. She simply watched and learned. The cell was not harsh. It was clean and efficient and completely empty except for a flat surface to sleep on and a recycling unit that provided water and food. The walls were smooth metal. The door was sealed. The air was cool and tasted like metal. Nothing hurt her. Nothing threatened her directly, but everything about the cell told her that she was a prisoner. The guards changed every 6 hours. Emma learned their patterns. She learned that they walked to the cell every 6 hours, checked the lock, and then walked away. They did not speak to her. They did not look at her with cruelty or kindness. They simply performed their function. Emma understood that they were not like humans. They did not see her as a person. They saw her as a component of a larger system. This knowledge was not comforting, but it was useful. On the research vessel, Sergeant Helen Cross was preparing her team. There were 8 of them. 8 humans against a vessel with hundreds of crew members. The odds were terrible. But Helen was a soldier, and soldiers understood that odds did not always determine outcomes. Helen understood that humans could accomplish things that seemed impossible because humans had something that they did not fully understand, determination born from love rather than logic. Helen studied the ship's layout. The detailed scans that Robert had collected showed the corridors where Emma was likely being held. It was in the detention section, a part of the ship designed to hold prisoners or cargo that needed to be contained. There were multiple routes to reach it. There were also multiple routes to escape from it. The plan was simple because it had to be simple. They could not fight their way through the vessel. They could not outthink a species that processed information faster than humans could. They could only move quickly and hope that the collective mind would not immediately understand what was happening. The moment we dock, we have maybe 90 seconds before they realize this is not a diplomatic mission, Helen told her team. In that 90 seconds, we need to be moving toward the detention section. We move fast. We do not stop. We do not fight unless we have no choice. We get the girl. We get back to the shuttle. We get back to our ship. And if they realize what we are doing before we reach the detention section, one of her soldiers asked. Then we fight, Helen said. And we probably die, but the captain will keep trying to get his daughter and maybe the next attempt will work, so we try to keep trying possible. The research vessel approached the ship. It looked enormous up close. The hull was dark gray metal covered with sections that could have been weapons or sensors or anything else. It was the product of a civilization that had evolved for efficiency above all else. There was no beauty in it. There was only purpose. The docking procedure went exactly as planned. They opened their receiving bay. The human shuttle descended into a massive hangar filled with equipment and personnel. Vincent sat in the pilot's seat beside him. Behind them in the cargo area, Helen and her team were hidden inside containers that looked like standard diplomatic equipment. Their weapons were hidden inside these containers. Their armor was hidden. They were going to surprise a species that did not believe in surprises. Vincent undocked the shuttle from the main ship. He would have to fly the shuttle manually. That meant if something went wrong during the rescue operation, the shuttle would already be in enemy territory. It meant if Helen's team failed, Vincent would be unable to escape. He did not think about this. He did not allow himself to consider the possibility of failure. The docking bay of the vessel was a place of perfect mechanical order. Automated systems guided the human shuttle to the landing pad. Personnel stood at attention, waiting for the diplomatic delegation to exit. K7 was not present, but a subordinate arbitrator was waiting to receive them. The shuttle doors opened. Vincent and stepped out, both wearing formal diplomatic clothing. They looked like negotiators. They looked like humans who had accepted the situation and were here to formally surrender. "Welcome to the harmony of purpose," the arbitrator said. "I am designation J12. We are prepared to receive your formal agreement to withdraw all claims to the crystal field." "We need to discuss the details," Vincent said. He kept his voice level. He kept his hands empty and visible. He looked exactly like a man who was here to negotiate. "Discussion is not necessary," J12 said. "The mathematics are clear. You will agree. Your daughter will be released. The transaction will conclude." Behind them, Helen and her team were moving. The containers had opened. The armor was being activated. The weapons were being checked. They had perhaps 60 seconds before they detected the movement. Vincent reached into his pocket and pulled out a data chip. It was a copy of the research the humans had been conducting on the crystal field. It would give the something to process while Helen moved through the ship. "Before we formally agree, I need to show you our findings," Vincent said. "I need to show you why this crystal field is even more valuable than you thought." J12 extended a limb to receive the data chip. In that moment of interaction, the sensors registered movement in the docking bay. The detection system immediately began to analyze what was happening. It took approximately 3 seconds for the collective mind to understand that the humans had brought weapons. The alarm system activated. It was not a sound alarm. It was a signal that moved through the collective consciousness, informing everyone on the ship that an incursion was occurring in the docking bay. Helen and her team moved. They moved with the speed that comes from training and desperation. They did not follow the cautious path. They took the direct route through the main corridors, moving faster than they had predicted humans could move. The response was immediate but not perfect. They began to move toward the disturbance, but they moved along paths that the collective mind calculated would intercept the humans. They did not account for Helen's team taking a different route. They did not account for the humans moving not toward safety, but toward the detention section. Emma heard the alarms. She heard the sound of something moving through the ship that was not normal. The door to her cell remained locked, but through the small window she could see activity in the corridor outside. Something was happening. The guards at her door suddenly moved. They moved toward the sound of the commotion, responding to signals in their collective mind. Emma understood in that moment that the most important rule of the prison had been broken. The routine had changed. The efficiency had been disrupted. Helen reached the detention section with her team intact. They had not encountered significant resistance. They were still processing the situation, still calculating the correct response. By the time they understood what was happening, Helen was already at the door to Emma's cell. The door lock was electronic. Robert had provided codes that he had recorded from previous visits. Helen entered the code and the door opened. Emma stood there, small and pale but completely calm. She looked at Helen with the same curiosity that she had shown the stars on the observation window of the research vessel. "Are you here to get me?" Emma asked. "Yes," Helen said. "We need to move now." Emma took Helen's hand without hesitation. She had observed enough in her confinement to understand that the routine had changed, that something significant was happening, and that the person in the armor was here to help her. They moved back through the corridors of the vessel. They moved fast. Behind them, they were beginning to understand exactly what was occurring. By the time they organized their response, Helen and Emma and the tactical team were back at the docking bay. Vincent was still in the shuttle, was at the weapons station. They were moving to block the exit, but they were still being processed by a collective mind that was trying to calculate the best response to an illogical situation. Helen brought Emma into the shuttle and sealed the door. They were rushing toward them, their weapons beginning to charge. Vincent pushed the shuttle into motion before the landing pad systems had finished retracting. They fired, but their shots went wide. They had calculated for a shuttle that would exit slowly. They did not calculate for a pilot who was willing to damage his own vessel to escape faster. The shuttle broke free of the docking bay with meters to spare. Vincent pushed the engines beyond their specifications. The vessel began to pursue, but it was large and slow compared to the human shuttle. The smaller human research ship was already moving toward the shuttles. Within moments, the shuttle was back on board the research ship. The docking clamps locked down. The alarms stopped. Vincent undid his pilot harness and turned to look back at the cargo area. Emma was there, standing in the center of Helen's tactical team, completely unhurt. Vincent moved back to his daughter and pulled her into his arms. For the first time since they had taken her, he allowed himself to breathe. His daughter was safe. Against every calculation, against every logical prediction, he had gotten his daughter back. Research vessel jumped to hyperspace. The vessel attempted to follow, but it was too slow. The humans the research vessel dropped out of hyperspace near a space station in neutral territory. It was a safe location, far from vessels, far from any place where they could easily pursue. Vincent sat with Emma in his private quarters. She was eating food from the ship's kitchen. Simple food, noodles and protein and water. She seemed more interested in the noodles than she was in discussing her ordeal. "They were not mean," Emma said while she chewed. "They were just not like us." "No," Vincent agreed. "They are not like us." "I could tell they did not understand why you would come get me," Emma continued. "I could hear them talking, not with words but with that clicking sound. They kept saying something like illogical and unpredictable." Vincent held his daughter and did not say anything. Emma was right. They did not understand. That was the only thing that had made the rescue possible. They could not imagine that a parent would mount a rescue operation with only a 20% chance of success. They could not understand that logic had nothing to do with it. On the bridge was running analysis on the communication systems. They had recorded everything during the escape. What was finding was interesting. They were not pursuing them. They were also not issuing threats or demands. The harmony of purpose had changed its vector and was moving away from the human vessel. Came to with her own analysis. She had studied the communications extensively. What she had found was disturbing and fascinating at the same time. "The collective mind is trying to understand what happened," said. "They are processing the behavior patterns. They are attempting to calculate why the human captain would make what they view as an illogical decision." "What conclusion are they coming to?" asked. "That is the interesting part," said. "They are not coming to a conclusion. They are adding new parameters to their models. They are trying to understand human emotion. They are specifically trying to understand the human concept of love as a decision-making factor." Looked at the display showing the vessel moving away. "Is that good or bad for us?" "It is good," said, Because it means they are no longer viewing the situation as a tactical problem. They are viewing it as a learning opportunity. When they want to learn something, they do not destroy it. They study it. K7 stood in the analysis section of the Harmony of Purpose. The collective mind had been processing data for hours. They had examined the captain's behavior, the crew's behavior, the tactical decisions. Every calculation showed that the human should have failed. Yet the human had succeeded. This was not possible according to the mathematical models they used. K7 was beginning to understand that the mathematical models were incomplete. There was a variable that they had not properly accounted for. The variable was human love. Not love as a weakness or a limitation, but love as a force that could make a creature do the impossible. K7 made a decision that surprised the other. K7 requested a communication channel to the human research vessel. Vincent was in his quarters with Emma when the communication request came through. He considered ignoring it. He considered just leaving, jumping to hyperspace, and never dealing with the again. But he was the captain of a research vessel, and captains answered communications. He told Emma to wait in the quarters and went to the communication center. K7 appeared on the screen. The arbitrator looked exactly as he had when Vincent last saw him, efficient, calm. "Captain Hayes," K7 said, "I have been analyzing the events that occurred on this vessel. I have been attempting to understand why you made the decisions you made. The mathematics indicate that your actions had a 78% probability of failure." "That is correct," Vincent said. "Yet you proceeded anyway," K7 said. "This behavior does not follow logical decision-making patterns. My analysis indicates that you chose the action that was most important to you over the action that had the highest probability of success." "Yes," Vincent said. K7's antennae moved in a pattern that Vincent interpreted as something like contemplation. "This is a characteristic that my species does not possess. We are efficient because we follow probability. You are powerful because you ignore probability when something else is more important." "I wanted my daughter back," Vincent said. "That was more important than any calculation." "I am beginning to understand," K7 said. "The collective mind has reached a consensus. We will withdraw our claim to the crystal field. We will also provide coordinates to 3 other crystal formations that have equal value. We will not pursue this matter further." Vincent felt something release in his chest. It was relief, but it was also something else. It was the understanding that this species, this cold and logical species, had just learned something new. "Thank you," Vincent said. "I am not motivated by gratitude," K7 said. "I am motivated by the desire to understand a force that we do not yet comprehend. Your species possesses something that we need to understand. I am requesting that our governments establish a formal research agreement. We wish to study human behavior, not to exploit it, but to understand it." "I will relay your request," Vincent said. "Captain Hayes," K7 said, "your daughter. I observed her during her containment. She did not panic. She did not become emotional. She observed and learned very much like the would have. But she also showed courage that seems to be connected to her bond with you. This is fascinating. Can you explain this to me?" Vincent thought about his daughter. He thought about how she had observed her captors and how she had been ready to act when the moment came. He thought about how she had not cried or panicked, but she had also not lost her humanity. "She was brave because she knew I would come for her," Vincent said. "She was calm because she trusted me. These are the things that make humans strong. We trust each other. We love each other. We know we are not alone." K7 was silent for a long moment. The collective mind of the was processing this information, trying to integrate it into their understanding of the galaxy. "This is valuable knowledge," K7 said. "We will incorporate this into our studies. We have one final question, Captain Hayes. Why did you choose to rescue your daughter knowing the probability of failure was so high?" Vincent looked at the arbitrator and gave the only answer that made sense to him. "Because she is my daughter, because I love her, because there was no other choice." K7's antennae moved again, and Vincent realized that they were not going to try to destroy the humans or conquer them or exploit them. They were going to study them with the same precision and dedication they applied to everything else. And in that study, they might begin to understand that humans were not weak because they felt love. Humans were strong because they felt love. The communication ended. Vincent sat in the communication center for a long time. Then he went back to his quarters to be with his daughter. Emma was asleep in her bed, her small body curled up under a blanket. Vincent sat in a chair near her and watched her sleep. She would probably have nightmares about the ship. She would probably have moments where she felt the fear she had been too brave to show. But she would also know forever that her father had moved heaven and space to bring her home. The research vessel made its way back to Crossroads Prime. As it traveled, the communication networks of the galaxy began to buzz with the news of what had happened. The humans had rescued a child from the humans had failed to follow logical calculation. The humans had succeeded anyway. Across the galaxy, different species began to add new notes to their files about humanity. They began to understand that humans were unpredictable. They began to understand that humans could not be modeled by mathematics alone. They began to understand that humanity possessed a strength that was not 3 months had passed since the rescue. The research vessel was back at Crossroads Prime for resupply and rest. Vincent stood in the observation area watching Emma play with other children in the recreational section. She was building something with blocks. She was laughing. She was herself again, which was all that Vincent had ever wanted. Came to stand beside him. She was reading her analysis report on the communication patterns of during the incident. What she had discovered was changing everything about how humans understood this species. They have officially requested a formal exchange, said. They want human researchers on their vessels. They want to study human behavior in detail. They are even proposing a joint research station to be built in neutral space. Have they given a reason? Vincent asked. They say they need to understand the variables that the mathematical models cannot calculate, said. They specifically want to understand human emotions and how those emotions drive decision-making. Emma looked up from her blocks and waved at Vincent. He waved back. His daughter was safe. That was what mattered. Everything else was details. Came to find Vincent with more information. The Galactic Council had received formal notification from the collective. The arbitrators had made an official statement about the incident at the Crystal Field Moon. What they had said was spreading across every communication network in the galaxy. They called humans the honey badgers of the galaxy, said with a hint of amusement in his voice. They said we are small compared to them, we are adaptive and clever in ways that their models did not predict, and that when we defend our young, we will fight with a ferocity that seems impossible given our size and resources. Vincent felt something like pride rise in his chest. It was not pride at being called honey badgers. It was pride in his species. It was pride in the humans who had fought impossible odds because they believed in something more important than mathematics. They have also made another statement, continued. They are withdrawing their aggressive expansion policy in 3 sectors of space. They say this is because they now understand that calculated efficiency is not always the highest goal. They say human unpredictability is a force that cannot be completely neutralized and therefore must be respected. Word spread quickly through the human colonies and stations. The species that had always seemed so superior, so logical, so inevitable, had learned a lesson from a single human captain and his small crew. For the first time in their history, had been forced to revise their understanding of a force they could not quantify or control. K7 made his way to Crossroads Prime. It was an unprecedented move for an arbitrator of his standing. He had never visited a human location before. He arrived at the station in a small diplomatic shuttle, accompanied only by 2 guards. Vincent received him in the diplomatic section of the station. Emma did not come with him this time. This was not a meeting about love or rescue or emotion. This was a meeting about respect between 2 species that saw the galaxy in completely different ways. K7 extended a limb in the formal greeting. Vincent clasped his hand around it. The contact was brief but significant. Captain Hayes, K7 said, the collective has asked me to convey formal acknowledgement of your achievement. You accomplished what our mathematical models indicated was impossible. The probability analysis was flawed. We are grateful for the opportunity to revise our understanding. Thank you, Vincent said. I am glad that Emma is safe. That was my only goal. You did not do this for the glory or the strategic advantage, K7 said. You did this because your daughter was taken. This is a variable that we did not properly account for. The collective is designed to optimize for the survival of the species. We sacrifice the individual for the collective good. Your species sacrifices the collective for the individual. This is fundamentally different. Both approaches have value, Vincent said. Humans need to protect individuals because we have small populations and limited. We need each other. I believe I am beginning to understand, K7 said. They have individuals, but they are not individuals in the way humans are. We are nodes in a network. The loss of one node does not diminish the network because the information is distributed. But in your species, the loss of one person is a real loss. This creates the drive to protect those we love. Yes, Vincent said. K7's antennae moved in the pattern that Vincent now recognized as something like contemplation. I have a request for you, Captain Hayes. The collective would like you to serve as liaison between our species. You understand both the need for efficiency and the human drive to protect those we love. You could help us understand each other better. Vincent considered this request. It would mean leaving the research vessel. It would mean spending time among teaching them about human behavior, learning about their species in return. It would be difficult and strange and important. I will do this, Vincent said, on one condition. My daughter comes with me. I will not be separated from her again, and I believe Emma has shown that humans can adapt to even the most alien environments. K7 seemed to process this for a moment. Then his antennae moved in the pattern that Vincent was beginning to recognize as agreement. This is logical, K7 said. The child demonstrated her ability to survive in our environment with composure and observation. Her presence would be valuable for understanding how humans develop their protective instincts and emotional bonds. Emma would grow up among She would learn their ways, their language, their methods of thought. And in doing so, she would become a bridge between two species that had nearly gone to war over something neither of them fully understood. The formal agreement was signed within the week. Vincent and Emma would travel to They would spend 2 years as researchers and liaisons, helping the collective understand the humans and helping humans understand would go with them as the primary, would remain on the research vessel, continuing the work of exploration. As Vincent and Emma boarded the transport that would take them to the vessel, Vincent looked back at Crossroads Prime. The station hung in space, a place where different species met and tried to understand each other. It was a small light in the darkness, but it was an important light. They had called humans honey badgers, small, fierce, protective of their young, capable of fighting far beyond what their size would suggest. It was not an insult. It was respect. It was the acknowledgement that humans possessed a strength that could not be calculated by mathematics. Across the galaxy, the story spread. Humans were not the strongest species. Humans were not the fastest or the most advanced or the most efficient. But humans loved their children more than they feared death. And that made humans something they had never encountered before. That made humans dangerous in a way that no amount of armor or weapons could match. The honey badgers of the galaxy had learned to roar, and the other species listened. Months later, in the research station that was being built in neutral space, Vincent sat with K7 and reviewed the early findings of their collaborative research. The data shows that human emotional attachment is not a flaw in logic, K7 said. It is a separate system that operates in parallel with logic. The two can conflict, and the human will often choose the emotional system over the logical one. That is correct, Vincent said. We are not purely rational beings. We are driven by emotion as much as by thought. This is why the rescue operation succeeded, K7 said. You did not calculate the most efficient path. You calculated the path that would bring your daughter home. Everything else was secondary. K7 had changed since their first meeting. The arbitrator still moved with mechanical precision. The arbitrator still processed information with efficiency. But K7 had also begun to show something that resembled curiosity about human nature. It was not emotion, but it was close to emotion. It was the drive to understand something that the collective mind could not predict. Emma played in the background of the research station, learning the language, learning to move among a species that was not human, learning that the galaxy was larger and stranger and more full of possibility than most humans ever realized. She would grow up to become a bridge between species. She would spend her life helping others understand that different did not mean dangerous. Different meant fascinating. Vincent watched his daughter and felt the weight of the past months settle on him. The fear, the desperate hope, the moment when he had held her again after thinking he might lose her forever. Those moments had changed everything. They had changed Vincent. They had changed humanity's place in the galaxy. The story of the honey badger would be told for generations. It would be taught to young who needed to understand that not all creatures operated according to mathematics. It would be told to young humans who needed to know that they possessed a strength that no weapon could match. It would be a reminder that love could overcome the most overwhelming odds, and that a parent's determination to protect their child could reshape the course of galactic politics. They had made a single mistake. They had believed that humans thought like they did. They had believed that logic would always win. They had believed that a parent would calculate the probability of success and accept the logical conclusion that rescue was impossible. But humans were not logical creatures, not completely. Humans were creatures of heart as well as mind. And when those two things aligned, when the heart and the mind both wanted the same thing, humans became unstoppable. Vincent looked at his daughter and smiled. She was safe. She was happy. She was becoming something new, something that bridged the gap between human and understanding. And in doing so, she was changing the galaxy in ways that neither species had predicted. The honey badgers had roared, and the universe had listened. The story of Emma and Vincent Hayes would live forever in the records of both species. A reminder that the greatest strength was not in calculation or efficiency or advanced technology. The greatest strength was in the love that made a single human willing to fight the impossible for the one they cherished. They would never fully understand emotion, but they would learn to respect it. And humanity would never lose the drive to protect those they loved, no matter the cost. In that difference, in that willingness to love despite the mathematics suggesting it was illogical, humanity had found its place among the stars. Small, fierce, protective, and absolutely formidable when it came to defending their young. The honey badgers of the galaxy had taken their rightful place in the cosmic order. In weapons or armor or processing speed, humanity possessed the strength of love, and that was a strength that could change the outcome of impossible situations. They, for the first time in their long history, began to study a force they could not calculate. And they began to learn that perhaps the most powerful equations in the universe were not written in mathematics at all, but written in the hearts of creatures willing to fight for those they loved. Air already gone, leaving behind only the question of what had just happened. K7 stood in the command center of the harmony of purpose and tried to understand the calculation error. The collective mind was still processing. Something had gone wrong with their prediction. Humans had done something they had not anticipated. It was a very strange sensation, and K7 did not like it. Insignificant against the enormous military transport. It looked like a single insect approaching a mountain. No threat, no danger, just a small creature moving according to the expected pattern. They prepared to receive the diplomatic delegation. They did not prepare for what was about to happen. They had made an error in their calculations. They had learned about human logic, but they had not learned about human love. They would learn this lesson very soon. They had made a terrible mistake.